Sup? You don't know who I am, but I'm gonna teach you how to lie really good in D&D. Let's get started. One of the issues I think we have in D&D as Dungeon Masters is we try to be as honest as possible when we're giving information. This is not really a bad thing. I think it just comes from us as Dungeon Masters not wanting to influence the player decisions too much, and that is a good thing, but I believe there's a better way. Before we get started, there are two very important pillars to understand as we go into our little lesson here. Number one, this is in pursuit of what I like to call a diegetic experience. The word diegetic usually refers to sound heard in a movie, and it's the sound that both the character in the film and you as the audience can hear at the exact same time. You're witnessing the music play through the character's ears as it plays through your ears. That's diegetic sound. But we're not just going for sound here today. We're going to go a bit more meta into this diegetic experience. By channeling into the player's thoughts and the character's thoughts, we want the player and the character to think the exact same thing and believe the exact same thing, all thanks to lying. And number two, say it with me, boys, charisma is the best stat in the game. In a very funny way, everything I'm going to be talking about here circles back to charisma in one way, shape, or form, as you, the Dungeon Master, are going to be lying and deceiving and persuading your characters to believe a certain version of the truth. With those two things out of the way, I think we can start our little lesson. So to build a quick scenario to catch you up to speed, I'm going to ask you Dungeon Masters if there's ever been a time where you've asked your players to roll a perception check and they didn't pass the roll, so then you instead told them that they don't see anything. And they stood in silence for a bit because they realized that their character doesn't see something that they should have seen had they just rolled higher. And now the player is understanding a piece of reality that the character is not understanding. This sort of thing leads to that very awkward scenario where your players are afraid to walk through a door because every single one of them has failed a charisma check. Charisma check? I have charisma on the brain, as you can see. It is the best stat in the game after all. Your players have failed the wisdom perception check to spot whatever danger lies beyond the door, so they just stand outside of it. Even if there's nothing there, I mean, they're just gonna stand there, menacingly, hoping that whatever is back there shows itself if they just behave cautious enough. This happens because you didn't lie to them, but you should just lie to them. Instead, take this example, for example. Next time you are making your players trudge through a forest, introduce them to a buddy of mine. This guy right here is Smitty the Swift. And you don't want to know why they call him the Swift. I mean, it's not like he's a level 20 monk or anything like that. I mean, what are the odds, right? Smitty the Swift is going to tell them that there are bandits that like to hide in the trees in this particular forest and ambush the whimsical adventurers. And even though Smitty warned them, the players are still going to slide him one of these bad boys, because nobody ever listens to old Smitty. Your party ranger is going to make a perception check to see if they can spot the cheeky Brady Bunch hiding in the trees, only for them to roll a 5. And not a 5 plus something like a 2 plus 3 equaling 5. I am just reminding myself that I actually do know how to count. And after they roll that miserable excuse for an attempt, you tell them that they don't see anything. Please stop doing this. It doesn't even make sense. I mean, what, do they not have eyes anymore? Instead of telling that miserable version of a lie, tell them a much better lie. Tell them that they see two orbs, about an inch apart, up in the trees, shrouded by the canopy, trained on your movement. If you strafe left, and so do they. There is no doubt about it. There are eyes watching you, stalking your party. And before you know it, this is the ambush our boy Smitty warned us about. And things can go very bad from here on out. But maybe they haven't noticed you, noticed them. And all it takes is one shot. One clean, pristine shot right through the... Oh shit, so now it's diabolical. But it's diabolical for a reason, because now your players have something to go off of. you're gonna have a hell of a time if you ask your players to make a perception check and they fail, and you just tell them, okay, thanks. That they're gonna panic. But that panic is not going to seep into the character, it's just going to be in the player mind. And there's this weird disconnect between the player and the character and what the two are feeling. We're not going for that today. We're trying to do better. We're going to be better than that. One of my favorite things that I like to talk about to my friends who don't play D&D, one day they'll probably tell me to shut up, but until then, I'm going to repeat about how everything in real life can be traced back to D&D. Like, it's insane how that works. There's times where I'm searching for my keys in the morning before I head out to work, and I can't find my keys. You know, I check my desk, and then I go and I check my pants pocket, and I check my coat pocket, and I check the fireplace, and before I know it, I'm raiding my neighbor's fridge looking for my keys, only to go back to my desk, and there they were. They were right there the entire time. I didn't realize that I rolled very low to find my keys at my desk, but I believed that I checked really good despite that. You see, in Dungeons and Dragons, the only disconnect between that example and a real life example is that in the game, you know when you roll low, right? Because you can see the low dice roll, and therefore you understand that your character did something inefficiently, and there's a problem there. But I knew about that. I wrote this video, so I know how to fix that problem. Let me stop you right there before you finish your mid-video rebuttals to my gaming style. This only works if you manage to make a lot of your skill checks really low, like barbarian IQ level low, like most of the time. Like, you're gonna have to allow good, rewarding perception checks to be at like a 5 or even a 2. You know, like sometimes things are just really easy to see. If you walk in to a room and, you know, there's a dead body with a light pointing down at it, and it's like a dead body under a spotlight, and there's a blood trail of footsteps just leading straight out, like they're gonna see that. You know, it's really hard to miss that. So a 2, let them see that for a 2. And now they are in this weird space in their head where they're not sure when a low roll is actually a failure or a low roll is good, you know? And the most important thing you need to make sure you do as a dungeon master is to make sure your vocabulary acknowledges the low roll itself, you know? Like, you have to allow that obviousness to really sink in to the player's mind, you know? Like, you need to start saying things like, surprisingly enough, even with a 5, you managed to break that door down. It was much weaker than you thought it was. Or even with a 2, you were lucky enough to spot the gem lying there on the forest ground. It seems like the sun has reflected a bit of light right off that gem straight into your eye. It is very important that we respect all rolls of that D20, at least sometimes, because we're trying to sow in uncertainty in our players' minds. They're not allowed to believe that a low number automatically equals a failure anymore. You have to essentially start restoring their trust in those low numbers to allow this diegetic experience to really fester and exist at your table. A detail about helping your characters believe low rolls is to reward them with the low roll anyway. You don't want to withhold information from them, but you might just want to give them information that they think is what they were looking for. When you ask them to make a perception check, they have no idea what it is you're trying to make them perceive. So you can be extremely liberal about what it is you tell them after the check, regardless of what number that they roll. If you know in your mind what the thing that you really want them to see is, like the actual helpful tip, you just keep that in your memory bank. But if they don't make that DC, if they don't hit that difficulty class to check that thing that you have in your mind that would actually help them, give them something else instead that makes them think that's what they were looking for. In the anime Death Note, there's a scene where Light Yagami is trying to hide his Death Note within a drawer in his bedroom. Minor spoilers for Death Note, but I think this is in the early couple of episodes. Plot of the anime aside, the important bit we're trying to secure here is understanding Light's trick to people trying to perceive where his death note might be, or investigate where his death note might be. What he's done is that he's created a false floor in this drawer so that when anyone tries to break into the already locked drawer in his bedroom at his desk, they will not see anything. It'll just be a normal drawer. However, that's suspicious, and Light realizes that that's suspicious, so instead he puts his personal diary inside of the drawer, on top of the false floor, because what's underneath the false floor is the actual death note. It's what he's actually trying to hide. So we can build a scenario here where if someone walked into his room, which I think actually does eventually happen in the anime, someone goes to just do a quick check of his room, but someone will walk into room and they will effectively make an investigation check to see if they can find anything suspicious with inside the young student's room. And they'll probably pick the lock to that drawer, getting inside of it, and then realizing that it's just a diary. And it would make sense that someone would hide a diary there. I mean, it's sensitive information after all. But that's what a low investigation check will get. You see, they rolled low, but you gave them something that they believe is relevant to what they thought they were looking for. A really high investigation check would be the one to detect that there's a false floor in the drawer to begin with. One of the many, many reasons why I love that anime, but I digress. You starting to see why this is a charisma thing? Like, it's really just persuading your characters, or your players rather, to really believe the words you're saying despite what the dice is telling them. Your voice kind of matters more at the table than the dice does, but you're not disobeying the dice. You're still heeding the dice's influence. You're just making sure that that dice does not dictate what they believe about themselves. It's what you say that they believe about themselves. Every dice roll in Dungeons and Dragons has to matter. I mean, all numbers are beautiful. And I didn't say that to make every robot watching this video now feel included. I said that mainly so that we understand that while the dice are telling the story, we are ultimately flavoring all of this. And it is the Dungeon Master's job, and the player's job to some degree, to add a lot of the how into the game that the dice doesn't really do. The dice is your binary tool in Dungeons and Dragons. It tells you yes or no. However, the Dungeon Master and the players themselves are the ones that decide the how and why. So to recap everything we've learned today, first of all, charisma is the best stat in the game. I hope that one has really sunk in. That's really probably the most important one here. Number 2 is that we are going for a diegetic experience. Players tend to remember diegetic experiences in Dungeons and Dragons more often than non-diegetic experiences because they feel the exact same thing that the characters in the game do, and it makes every moment kind of hit a bit harder. And number 3, we need to make sure that all roles are important within your D&D world. You need to allow low checks to exist, and to make those low checks believable, you need to supply them with something that they think would have been the answer for a high roll, but they got it on the low roll, i.e. Light's diary. And with all that being said, just try and remember that although you are the Dungeon Master, you are on the player's sides. So maybe it's time we end this video, and you can get out there and go play some more D&D. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.